involved in complex trust-related cases. He has a long-standing experience in all matters related to family law, with a preference to mediate and explore settlements. He has handled numerous cases relating to the divorce and custody, division of assets, and adoption. He is a senior adjunct lecturer with the ISEC French Business School. He lectures in intellectual property, international business law, and business ethics. In the second quarter of 2018, he received the Lecture of the Year award globally across all their campuses. Founded in 1907, ISEC Business School is one of the top business schools in the world, with campuses in France, Morocco, and Singapore. He also volunteers with legal clinic run by the state courts of Singapore as a part of Scandinavian Law's pro bono commitments. Mr. Siva is also the General Counsel globally for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, where he advises the managing board of ISKCON, known as the Governing Body Commission, on various aspects of legal affairs. He also secured various glorious positions as member Law Society of Singapore, as member Singapore Academy of Law, member Institute of Singapore Trademark Agents. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Sivaji, and we are keen to hear you. And thanks to our Professor Kin Gupta ji, director of the program, Dr. Belu Gupta ji, coordinator, Dr. Aswini Shival, Dr. Nitesh, Dr. Saswat, or Dr. Pramod Tiwari, and Dr. Saurabh Rana, and also Ethic Craft Club for extending collaboration with Law Center 2. We hope the same in future also. So I welcome and thank again and again all of you from the core of my heart. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words and blessings. And we are looking forward for an enthusiastic session. And over to you, Prabhuji. Looking forward for your session.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Dr. Mahavir, Prabhu, thank you so much.
Sir, thank you.
It was an honor to meet you, sir. Thank you. And of course, Dr. Belu Gupta, I'm very happy to meet you too. And to all honored and distinguished guests, you've given so much of your valuable time to come and be part of this very august association of professionals. I was looking at the list of participants, and I think there are so few non-doctors here that I must be in the minority. And I'm very happy to be part of this very distinguished assembly. You know, it is stated in our Vedic culture that whenever two persons meet, it is never accident. In Vedic culture, there is never such a thing as an accident. There's always what we call arrangement. They both start with the letter A, but arrangement is a very powerful medium for us to meet. And I always sincerely believe that it is not accidental that we have the opportunity to meet each other today. So I am very happy to come on board again. The last time, it was very wonderfully organized by the University of Delhi, Law Center 2. I'm so impressed, by all the work that all of you have done. And today's topic is so close to my heart, particularly because I'm not in India and I'm in Singapore. I was born in Singapore. My parents were born in Singapore. My grandparents were born in Singapore. So 3 generations of my family have been in Singapore. And yet, until I came across the wonderful culture from India, I could not, understand how glorious it was. When you're in a foreign country trying to assert your understanding of who you are as an Indian, it becomes more precious actually for you to understand the finer touches of your culture. And if not for the wonderful understanding of Vedic culture, I would not be in the position that I am, being peaceful and satisfied with my existence. So I want to share with you a screen today, and the topic is very wonderful. I cannot do justice to the way Shubha Vilas handles beautiful lectures, but I will try to present this to the best of my ability. So please forgive me, if there are any discrepancies anywhere. Let me share this, and hopefully you will be able to see it. Gupta ji, doctor, can you see it? Everyone can see
Yes,
it?
Prabhuji, it is very
Okay,
much
very good.
clear. Yes.
At any point of time, if you think, something is not running right, please feel free to interrupt me, because sometimes, slide sharing can also pose technical problems. I want to make sure that the audience gets the best of it. Thank you. Today's topic that has been given to me by all of you is this wonderful topic of the glories of Vedic India. And when we talk about the glories of something, it means it is something very exceptional. Glories also refers to something which is very deep and very impactful. That is why something is considered to be glorious. When we talk about Vedic India, we cannot divorce the word Vedic from India. Because generally speaking, when we talk about Vedic India, the perception and the focus for us is to understand the basis of us looking through the lens of what we call the Vedic scriptures. The Vedic scriptures became the foundation of the culture of what we know today as Vedic India. And it would be remiss if we don't understand that when we talk about Vedic scriptures, we look to the four Vedas, Rig, Yajur, Atharva, and Sama. We also look to the corollaries of the Vedas. For example, the Upanishads. I always liked the meaning of Upanishad. Upanishad means to sit close and hear, because that is how knowledge has always been transmitted traditionally, that we would sit down and we would hear the transcendental knowledge from the spiritual master or the master of any kind of knowledge. And that was always the Vedic tradition in India. We also have the Puranas and the Itihasas. They are very unique because while the rest of the world may think of them as mythology, those of us who understand them and who have been privileged to be born into Indian heritage will understand the value of their historical recordings. The Puranas also have one very important point that they give, one great value. The lofty aspects and concepts of the Vedas are very nicely put in simpler forms in the Puranas. But simple doesn't mean simplistic. Simple means putting great wisdom in simple, dynamic, and fluid concepts so that we understand it in our day-to-day life. That has always been the unique contribution of Vedic India. And of course, the quintessential scripture that summarizes all that is Vedic India is the Song of God, known as the Bhagavad Gita. So we want to be clear, what is the premise for our discussion when we look at Vedic India? The general understanding about Vedic spirituality is sometimes short of what reality should be. When you see the grandchildren here sitting down and speaking to a grandmother, and she's probably reading to them some stories, sometimes people have the idea that whatever that we are hearing or we have gotten from the Vedic texts, they are only mythology, or they may be just some stories with some moral instructions. And unfortunately, sometimes a new generation of persons who are born and exposed to this idea can grow up thinking that whatever that we have in the Vedas, whatever that Vedic India has been about, is all a myth. And actually it is all allegorical, but there is no basis to it. But the people who think that way also go on to think, therefore, by extension of logic, that anything to do with spirit is a very irrelevant concept in this world. That when you talk about something spiritual, how can it actually offer me any practical benefit in my life? That is the question that people ask. In Singapore, I actually speak on management principles of Bhagavad Gita in daily life. I do it at the National University of Singapore. I do it at the NUS Business School. And when people come to realize how much of practical information spirituality offers, they're actually shocked. And they cannot believe that it's actually coming from Vedic India. But unfortunately, if we are not careful, we can very quickly dismiss it. So this is the challenge that we are facing. And as generation passes by generation, it is in danger of being lost, actually. So this is a very important point for us to understand. But there is a correct understanding about Vedic spirituality. The Vedas, if we study them very carefully, they contain very advanced knowledge. And this knowledge has proven time and again to be beneficial for humankind in a variety of fields. And the other thing that we can share with many people is that Vedas and Vedic knowledge, they actually contain news that you can use, which means they actually contain information, they contain a wealth of knowledge that actually is more practical than we can even think about. So this is the paradigm that we are in between today. The idea that Vedic literature and therefore Vedic India is a myth, that it has a once glorious past, but it had no value. And therefore we look to everywhere else in this world, but we forget to understand that glory is in our backyard. That glory is actually in our culture. You know, sometimes the grass always looks greener on the other side. Sometimes when you see something across, a mirage in a desert always looks good until you walk to it and you realize, wait a minute, there was nothing there. That is the challenge that we face today. Another word that's very important in this paradigm, in this capsule of Vedic scriptures, is the use of the word Puran. Very often people think of Puran as mythology, but actually in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the Bhagavata Puran, this very important statement is given actually. Srimad Bhagavatam is the repetition of history which happened some hundreds of millions of years ago. Only the most important factors of history are picked up to be recorded in this transcendental literature. This is found in the first canto of Bhagavata Purana, 6th chapter, 11th shloka. So this is a very important point. The problem is, or the challenge is, for a majority of us who have grown up on Western education, time for us and recording of facts for us always tends to be linear. But we don't realize that the tradition in Vedic India was always to actually capture facts and events as they happened, but to prioritize them according to importance. And so sometimes we miss that out and we think Puranas and Vedas and all these chronicles, they are mythology. So this is an important fact to also remember. Now let us understand what we are speaking about in terms of the glory of Vedic India. When we look at the Upanishads, there's a very important Upanishad known as Mundaka Upanishad. And there it declares that there are two categories of knowledge known to all of mankind. So wherever we are, we will find that we are always accumulating knowledge, but this knowledge becomes the basis of behavior. You will realize one thing, until we know something, then very seldom do we act on it. When we act on knowledge, knowledge becomes transferred into action. And therefore, knowledge becomes very fundamental for us. The Upanishads tell us that there are two kinds of vidya or knowledge. There is apara vidya, which is actually considered to be knowledge which is useful for this material world where we are staying. Advanced scientific concepts, theories, practices. These are things that lawyers, doctors, engineers, we're used to understanding and accumulating this concept. In the field of arts and humanities, there is also the concepts of how to perform these arts, how to advance these humanities. So that is also under apara vidya. Thriving economies on how to make material advancement in this world, that also comes under this knowledge. So actually the Upanishads were not only speaking about spiritual knowledge, but they also recognize the practicality that you and I will have to earn some money and put it in the bank and survive in this world. They were not always speaking about something which was so lofty that we could not understand it on the ground. But at the same time, the Upanishads also told us that there is another field of knowledge known as Paravidya. Paravidya means higher and Aparavidya means lower. Lower means grounded, where we are. and para means higher, lofty. This Paravidya includes the realm of what we talk about known as the absolute truth, which is beyond just a temporary platform of matter. Another very important, unique quality of the glory of Vedic India is that Vedic India emphasized the culture of values, which is considered to be a higher wisdom. And how do we understand values? We understand values when we inquire about who we are and what is this nature of the world. These are questions that at some point of our lives, either when we are very young, when we are middle-aged, or there is some event that happens to us, at some point, everyone is going to ask this question. And so this question also becomes very important in the acquisition of knowledge. So this is actually the foundation of what the Vedic scriptures actually offered us. Let us now look at Aparavidya. Sometimes people think that the Western technology and the Western contribution to science, art, and economy is unparalleled. Yes, they have made vast progress over the years, but you will be surprised that in the Vedas, for example, there has been so much of information and advances made in all these different fields. Let's look at contributions in mathematics. Lawyers generally are not so good in math. That's why we ended up farming out work to accountants, isn't it? But we must recognize one very important thing. Vedic India actually invented the number system. Zero was invented by Aryabhatta. Aryabhatta himself was the first to explain the spherical shape, size, diameter, rotation, and even the speed at which the Earth attains its orbit. And historians attribute that to the 499 AD. That's a long time ago. And historically, that puts Aryabhatta in a very, very prominent league of astute mathematicians. The Pythagoras theorem that we are all familiar with has actually been explained, and historians will take note of that, in a portion of the Vedas known as the Sulabha Sutrasa. And therefore, the Indians at that time of Vedic India were no less expert in these areas. Astronomy. When you look at the sky and you look at the amazing planets that we understand today, some of us may not realize that there was a very famous astronomer known as Bhaskara Acharya. He calculated time taken by Earth to orbit the sun hundreds of years before the astronomers smart actually begin developing that concept. If you look at another portion of the Vedas known as the Siddhanta Shiromani, it's actually in the 6th book, which is entitled the Bhuvana Kosham. Bhaskara Acharya II, his predecessor was Bhaskara Acharya I. He describes in detail the concept of gravity. And this concept of gravity was actually described in the Sastras at least 400 years before it becomes formalized as a concept by Sir Isaac Newton. For those of us who are familiar with the Bhagavata Purana, when you read the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, you will find a description of all the planets in the Milky Way. And each planet, right, its calculation of orbit is also given. And what's amazing is that there is this description that when the material universe was created, you all know how it is. Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, the Lord lies down on the bed of the milk ocean. And from him sprouts out a lotus flower. And on that lotus stem, on the lotus flower is Brahma. And Brahma begins the material creation of this universe. When you read that portion of Bhagavata, there is a very nice description of how all the planets are actually maintaining their orbits despite their weight. When you study that carefully, you'll realize the ability of the planet to maintain their orbits despite their weight is because of the principle of gravity. Bhagavata Purana had already alluded to the principle of gravity thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. If you look at another very important textbook, most astronomers will know this textbook, the Surya Siddhanta. It is a textbook on the astronomy of ancient India, and the mathematics of it is just amazing. It contains data about the diameter of Earth, the distance between the Earth and Chandra, which is today known as the moon, which are very close to modern measurements. So that's an amazing point from astronomy. Some of us may be doctors in the field of gynecology, and in Srimad Bhagavatam, specifically in the 3rd canto, you will find that in the 31st chapter of the 3rd canto, it describes in astonishing details the process of conception. The process of conception. From the time of preconception, when the semen and the ovum will mix, to the point where a pea-like formation of the fetus is starting, and eventually how that little pea-like formation grows through the months in the period of gestation and becomes a fully formed fetus. Bhagavatam also describes as the fetus is growing in the womb of the mother, what are some of the physiological changes in the fetus and in the womb of the mother. It's an incredible reading experience. I remember reading this when I was 15 or 16 years old, and I was shocked because I had just read and done human social biology in school. And when I read the description of what Bhagavatam was telling me and what I had studied in school, even a novice like me could not fail to understand the similarities of them. Even though historically, Srimad Bhagavatam is thousands of years older than what we understand science to be today. Let me give you an example. In the first night, this is from Bhagavatam, the ovum and the semen mix. On the 5th night, that mixture ferments into bubbles. On the 10th night, it develops into a form like a plum fruit, and then it becomes a form like a lump of flesh and eggs. In the 1st month, the head is formed. In the 2nd month, the hands, feet, limbs take shape. The nails, fingers, toes, body hair, bones, skins, organs of generation, and other apertures, they start appearing after the 2nd month. In the 4th month, 7 essential ingredients, bile, blood, flesh, fat, bone, marrow, and semen, are created in the fetus. In the 5th month, the fetus begins to feel hungry. And if you ask mothers when they started feeling their hunger pangs, they will tell you that it starts after the 1st trimester. It's actually in the middle trimester that they begin to feel really hungry. And it corresponds with the 5th month when the child's hunger begins to take place too. In the 6th month, Bhagavatam tells us that the child is enclosed in the amnion fluid and it begins to have more movements. I remember when my wife was pregnant, and every time she got a kick from our son or later our daughter, it was a very momentous occasion. And I was reminded of how Bhagavata Purana could tell you when the child would start kicking in the womb. In the 7th month, the child becomes endowed with consciousness of development. It is pressured by the intestines of the mother because the space is small, but the child is growing. Bhagavatam tells us the physiological challenges of the child, something that medical science has never been able to tell us. It tells us that the womb of a mother is a small space. The head of the child is turned towards his belly and its neck is arched like a bow. It is in such a frightful condition. And Bhagavatam tells us something amazing. A child in the womb at that time prays with folded hands to its creator. What an amazing point. Today, when you read about how mothers are told to relax themselves, you have CDs and music, which is supposed to be very calming for you as a mother, calming for the child. Why? Because thousands of years ago, Bhagavatam already has told us that the child is alive. It feels. When mother is angry, child can sense it. When mother is hungry, the child can sense it. And this has all been given to us in our Vedic culture. It's amazing, actually. Contributions in medical science are no less. Maharishi Shushruta is the father of surgery, and he has written the very famous manual known as the Shushruta Samhita. Just like you have Manu Samhita, you have Brahma Samhita, and this you have in the field of medical science, Shushruta Samhita. This was approximately historically about 2,600 or 700 years ago. And there appears to be evidence of even surgical procedures being attempted and performed. Descriptions of what appears to be cesarean birth, removing of the child from the mother by surgical means, removal of film or coverings on the eye, very much like how cataract is formed today, healing of fractures by natural means, something we see even till today, and something that many orthopedic surgeons will tell you to do as a first cause of healing, even the removal of gallstones and urinary stones. These are all documented in the Samhita. Another very famous personality is Charaka. He is considered the father of medicine in Vedic India. And he was the one who consolidated the Ayurveda almost 2,500 years ago. I don't have to tell you, coming from India, how much a part of life Ayurveda has become. Not just in India, but all over the world. Anywhere where the Indian diaspora is, in Singapore, 20 years ago, nobody knew about Ayurveda. We heard something in India about Ayurveda. Today, Ayurveda has become an established practice in Singapore because it has efficacy, it is natural, and almost 20 to 30% of Ayurvedic patients in Singapore are actually non-Indians. So this shows you the strength, right, of the place of Ayurveda in even modern day civilization. In case you don't want to believe me and whatever we have researched, let us hear what are some of the great scientists in the field of Aparavidya, those who have studied Western concepts, and they have been scholars and experts in their own rights. Niels Bohr was a German astrophysicist. He was born in 1885, died in 1962. He was Danish, sorry. And he had a very nice statement because he studied the Vedic culture. And he said that whenever I have questions, I go to the Upanishads because the Upanishads give me illumination. Werner Heisenberg was a German. He was an astrophysicist and a mathematician. And he was one of the pioneers in the field of quantum theory. And this is what he had to say when he studied quantum theory and actually studied it with Vedanta. He said quantum theory will not look ridiculous to people who have read Vedanta. That's amazing. And what can I say about Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb? He also was exposed to the teachings of the Vedas. And this is what he had to say. Access to the Vedas is the greatest privilege this century may claim over all previous centuries. Because that was the time when the Vedas were finally actually being translated into English, and a whole vast audience around the world began to understand what was a hidden treasure of Vedic India. And not only these scientists are there, there are two other very famous personalities. Alan Watts was actually a philosopher, and he was a religious historian. So he understood, and studied Bhagavata Purana as well as the Vedas. This is what he had to say. To the philosophers of India, however, the theory of relativity is not a new discovery. Just like the concept of light years is no matter for the astonishment of people who are used to thinking of time in terms of kalpas. In fact, when quantum theory came up and quantum time was spoken about, the idea that there is a fifth dimension and that actually we may be all moving in dimensions, but because of the speed of time and light, we are unable to actually see each other. This has been part of Vedic civilization for a long time. The Vedas talk about the Devatas like Indra and Marut, Brahma, who live for a very long period of time. The Vedas speak of our ancestors who stay in a loka known as Pitra Loka. There, one day is the equivalent of 365 days in a human life. That is why traditionally, when we offer pindas for our ancestors, we do it once a year. People may think from the earthly platform, aren't they starving because you're only offering them food once a year? But in terms of their life and time, our 1 year is just a 1 day. Now, if this is not the aspect of quantum mechanics, then nothing else is. And that's why these philosophers, when they read about this, they were amazed. Jean Chauvin Belly was a very famous personality in the French Revolution. He was also a French astronomer. And this is what he had to say. And note when he was born and when he lived, 1736 to 1793. Sometimes we don't realize at that time, the Hindu culture was considered to be an ancient and powerful and established culture. And he said that the movement of stars, which was calculated by Hindus some 4,500 years ago, does not differ even by a minute from the tables which we are using today. These are the contributions of reputed scholars in their own fields about the culture of Vedic India. We also want to understand, and let's not forget, and many of you would know, that India has also been home to powerful and great civilizations of the past. The famous example is the lost city of Dwarka. I don't know how many of you have been to Dwarka, not Dwarka in Delhi, but Dwarka in Gujarat. I've had the good fortune from 1992, because my spiritual master was actually building a temple in Dwarka as part of an ISKCON project. I had the good fortune of traveling to Dwarka every year. And it was an amazing experience. Dwarka is really at the corner, right at the edge, you know. It's a beautiful coastal city. But very often people forget that when you read the scriptures of Vedas, especially in Bhagavatam, Dwarka was an ancient city. It was said to have been established by Krishna himself more than 5,000 years ago. Less than 20 or 30 years ago, right, along the coastal city of Dwarka, divers actually found that there were remnants of what used to be a city between the coastland of Dwarka and an island known as Bet Dwarka. Between Bet Dwarka and mainland Dwarka, there's a huge area, and Krishna's Dwarka was actually if you look at Bhagavatam's description, the whole space between Bet Dwarka and mainland Dwarka was actually the ancient city of Dwarka. And it is stated in Shastras that when Krishna departed from this world, it was a cataclysmic event, and Dwarka became submerged. In fact, to corroborate this fact, that it is not fiction but fact, archaeologists have discovered evidence of a sunken and fortified city for many years now. This is a very famous book by one of the most respected archaeologists of India, Dr. S.R. Rao. And he was asked by the Archaeological Survey Institute, ASI, of India, to conduct a second round of excavation in 1979. If you go to Dwarka, you will find actually there is a building known as the Archaeological Survey Institute of Dwarka. And some of the artifacts are actually found there. I have personally seen a chariot wheel, which is 7 foot tall, and it is found in the ASI branch in Dwarka. And this is amazing because these underwater expeditions have found red ceramic tiles. They have found wall-like structures, which indicated that this must have been a fortressed city. And the carbon dating techniques show us that it would probably have been about 3,500 to 9,000 BC, anytime within that range, and possibly even older. Another area that Glory of Vedic India is famous for is actually the musical genius of music and art. Some of you may be very established musicians here yourselves. I was schooled in the art of Western style playing of piano in Singapore. But later on, when I began to understand and appreciate the glory of Vedic India, I started learning, Vedic instruments. I started learning traditional Vedic instruments. And I started learning music that way. But I did not realize that music in India goes all the way back to Vedas. All the notations of Vedic music as we know today are actually found in the Vedas. In fact, the science of music penetrates even the science of architecture in India. Some of you may have gone to the beautiful temples in Hampi. You will see wonderful architectural designs. Some of you may even have gone all the way south to Kanyakumari. And there is a very unique Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva temple known as Suchindram. Both these temples have one thing in common. They have musical pillars. Musical pillars. If one gently taps the pillars in the right way, the basic notes of our swara, sari, gamapa, dina, all of this are produced. Scientists have yet to understand this phenomenon, and they cannot understand how this has happened. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, I want to play for you a 3 to 4 minute video that showcases these amazing pillars in Hampi particularly. Let's take a look at it, shall we? Hopefully it'll come out right.
Hampi, India. Here lie the ancient ruins of Vijayanagara, believed to have been constructed between the 14th and 16th centuries AD. At its center stands the Vila Temple Complex, a masterpiece of Indian architecture and the largest and most revered temple in the city.
Mithila temple was built with the mind of creating a celestial palace here on earth. With that in mind, the king
Prabhuji, can we increase the volume of the video? It is not audible enough.
Oh, okay, let me increase it.
great craftsmen to create this wonderful
Is this
building
better?
that can
Yeah,
also
better,
have
Prabhuji.
wonderful sound that will please God.
Attached directly to the temple is what is called the Ranga Mandapa, or the stage pavilion. Here there are many pillars, some reaching to a height of nearly 12 feet. There's a series of what are called compound pillars, where you have a central pillar surrounded on all sides with smaller colonnettes. These colonnettes are famous because when they're struck, they emit beautiful and haunting sounds. According to the local guides at the temple, the 56 pillars are individually tuned to one of the 7 notes of the sarigama, an ancient Sanskrit musical scale dating back thousands of years that is still predominant in Hindi music today. Certain groups of these pillars have been crafted to represent the tonal vibrations of the scale for different instruments, some being crafted to represent woodwinds, some being crafted to represent percussion instruments, etc.
The British, when they were in charge of India, were mystified by this amazing quality and actually cut one of the pillars to see how it was done. But it was just granite, and it was just very careful workmanship.
While the stone pillars themselves seem like simple technology, recent analyses have revealed they may be comprised of an advanced geopolymer blend of granite with silicate particles and metallic alloys. But what continues to puzzle scientists is that the first basic geopolymers were invented in the Soviet Union during the 1950s, hundreds of years after these pillars were crafted.
As a geologist, and how this was done is really baffling and amazing. I've heard reports of people trying to mimic it in modern times, to try to just do a little section of it, even one pillar. And people just haven't been successful. So what were they doing back then? We just don't know.
According to Hindu priests, each of these pillars was specifically tuned harmonically in order to communicate with the gods. So you have to wonder, did extraterrestrial beings come down and give instructions on creating these specific frequencies?
Isn't that amazing? That tells us one thing, that in the Vedas, it is clearly stated that music has come from the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. The Devatas in the higher realms of creation, they also have a very rich history of music, and that they have shared it with the denizens of planet Earth. And here you are in this very short documentary, hearing the same thing. It's amazing. I've been to Hampi personally, I've been to Suchindram personally, and it's amazing how different pillars can actually imitate different parts of different instruments. And it's amazing. If you play instruments, you will feel that really this is the glory of the music that is Vedic India. But India is not just about, or has not been about, just music and architecture and science. It has also been an ancient economic power. If you ever have time, look at the OECD edition of the World Economy, volumes 1 and 2. They are very respected books, actually, that speak about economy. And it is actually documented that from the period of 3000 BCE to about 10th century AD, ancient India was known as the Golden Sparrow because she had the largest economy in the world. And China was a close second. From 10th century onwards, because of the hordes of foreign conquest coming into India, that position declined. But even then, there is evidence to support that up till the 15th century, India's economic dominance was irrefutable. Irrefutable. In fact, if you look at Angus Madison, who economists will know as very noted in the British sphere of economics, India's economic growth only took a devastating hit when she became a British colony. Some of you may have heard of Abu Fazil. He is considered to be one of the Navaratnas, isn't it, of Emperor Akbar's kingdom, right? And he was also one of the great historians who documented Empress Akbar's life also. He has been a very respected figure in the court of Akbar. And many historians who study Indian history record that his recordings and observations about India at that time actually corroborate very nicely with other historians too. This is what he had to say about the wealth of Vedic India. He says in Iran and Turan, which was actually part of the Middle Eastern area, where only one treasurer is appointed, the accounts are in a confused state. But here in India, the amount of revenue is so great and the businesses so multifarious that 12 treasuries are needed for storing the money. 9 for the different kinds of cash payments, 3 for precious stones, gold, and inlaid jewelry. The extent of the treasuries are too great to admit of my giving a proper description. So wealth, it is nicely stated in Vedic India that there are many different gradations of wealth. There is the wealth of knowledge, but India was also never short of the wealth that we know wealth as today, as an economy. This is the greatness of India. All that I've described to you is the glory of Vedic India. Lest anyone think at any point of time that India has always been a third world country advancing into a new world country or a developed country. Let us not forget the advances that India has contributed and continues to contribute. But where am I now? I'm right in the middle of a picture that you all see of Alexander the Great, whom you know tried to invade India but failed. But Alexander the Great is looking at a gentleman who's lying down, and Alexander is great, and no one would refute him. He was a powerful conqueror. And yet this gentleman is lying down and appears to put up his hand as if he's going to push him away. Why is this slide right in the middle of our presentation of India? Because of what it stands for. Diogenes was a very famous ancient philosopher from Greece. And men came from all parts of the land to see him and talk to him. But Diogenes was a very strange man. He said that no man needed much. And therefore, even though he was very famous and very potentially wealthy, he never lived in a house. He slept in a barrel and he rolled with the barrel from place to place. He spent his days sitting in the sun and saying wise things to those who were around him. When Alexander the Great came with his huge army into that town and everyone was falling at Alexander's feet, he heard about this wise man Diogenes. And he was wondering, everyone is coming to see Alexander. Why isn't Diogenes coming to see me? So he himself went with his soldiers to go and see this man. And true enough, he found him outside the town, lying there with the barrel. You can see the barrel behind him, isn't it? And what was he doing? He was just lying back and enjoying the strong Grecian sun. When he saw Alexander the Great, everybody else just bowed down because he's Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was the epitome of all that is Apara Vidya. He had attained the great heights of materialistic success. But when Diogenes, who had nothing with him, no wealth, no bank balance, nothing, when he saw Alexander, this is how he greeted him. Alexander looked at him and said, Diogenes, my friend, I have heard a great deal about you. Is there anything I can do for you? Alexander thought, like everybody else, he would fall at his feet and ask him for wealth, ask him for something. But Diogenes said something very interesting. Yes, you can step aside a little so that you do not block the sunshine from me. That's all he said. That's all he said. Alexander the king, the conqueror, the great, he was very surprised. But instead of becoming angry, he turned to his officers and he said something very wonderful. Say what you like, my men, but if I were not Alexander, I should like to be Diogenes. Why do you think he said that? Because everyone recognizes at some point of our life that no matter how much advances we have made in this material world, making advances does not equal to happiness, does not equal to eternal peace, does not equal to deep satisfaction. 25 years of practicing as a lawyer, and I'll tell you, some of my richest clients are and most of them don't sleep very well in the night. They have to take a concoction or a cocktail of sleeping pills. And when I tell them, you have so much money, why are you worried about? He said, that's why I'm precisely worried about. Because I'm worried that my net value will go down. I'm worried that I will lose this investment. I'm worried that I may not acquire something else. And here we are thinking that Apara Vidya is the glory of any civilization. The beauty of India is that Vedic India did not only emphasize on Apara Vidya, it also emphasized on Diogenes. So while there was an Alexander in Vedic India, always excelling all the different fields of astronomy and science and arts and music, Vedic India was also highly steeped in actually another form of Vidya. And this Vidya is known as Paravidya. Paravidya is transcendental knowledge, and Paravidya is the values that define us as who we are. And that is why in Vedic culture, the word Hinduism does not exist. Hinduism is a misnomer, actually. It's a mispronunciation of the river Sindhu, right, on the Khyber Pass. That's all. It's a mispronunciation that has become what we are. And actually, that is not who we are. The real name for this Vedic culture is Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana means eternal. Even though someone may have sat below a tree and an apple fell on his head, it didn't mean that he discovered gravity. Gravity was always there, right? He didn't invent it. He just found out, gravity is there. So the Vedas tell us that all these concepts that we talk about today, they have always been eternal in nature. There has been no one who actually founded them or created them. They may have been discovered, but Sanatana Dharma is so unique as a contribution of Vedic India because it is eternal and it is united in the service not just to God, but to all living entities. Sanatana Dharma is a way of life, and it guides us by values which have been given by the Supreme Truth. And that is how we are guided in living. And unlike many other civilizations, the Vedic culture is a collection of spiritual experiences, which is meant to uplift us from darkness to ignorance, and gradually from the ignorance of darkness to the light of knowledge. That is why you all know this famous prayer that we all chant. Lead me from the asat to the sat. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from death to immortality. Do you think the Vedic scholars did not know that when the body dies, the body dies? Were they foolish to talk about immortality? No, because they were looking beyond the body. And that is why it is so important to understand this. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityumar amritam gamaya. Material upliftment is incomplete without the progression and advancement of the spirit. This is a very important thing. And this is why you have invited all of us today, because you are finding the sangam, you are finding the junction between the glory of Vedic India, which propelled material knowledge, and the glory of India that propelled spiritual values. Another beautiful glory of Vedic India in Paravidya is this idea of the culture of harmony. Do you realize historically, India never rejected any kind of religion. India never rejected any conquest. The beauty of Vedic India was we absorbed everything. We Indianized everything, so to speak. It's amazing. I tell my French students when I teach them that Catholic faith has Mother Mary, right, as a very important figure. If you go to a South Indian church in Velangani, which is very famous, you will see Mother Mary there, but she's wearing a traditional sari. And that is how Vedic India is glorious. It has never rejected any thought which is meant for the progression of mankind. Why? Because of this wonderful point in the Rig Veda. Indram mitram varunam agnim ahur, atho divya sa suparno garutman, ekam sad vipra bahuda vadanti, agnim yamam vataswanam ahur. They call him Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Agni. He is heavenly Garuda who has beautiful wings. But truth is one. The sages and the wise call him by many names. We are all seeking the truth. And Vedic India recognized that truth comes in numerous names and forms. We may all be from India, but we may speak different languages. My origin is from Kerala, right? So I should know Malayalam and I should know Tamil. But because I've spent so many years also in Gujarat, because of the work that I did for ISKCON in Dwarka and Rajkot, if you ask me anything about construction in Gujarati, I will also know it. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that if a Frenchman and a German man and someone who's a follower of Sanatan Dharma, if they all go to a water cooler, let's not talk about a lake. Today, we all have water coolers in our campuses, right? When we go to drink from a water cooler, we all have a different name for water, but water is always water. The taste of water will never be different. And this is the Paravidya of Vedic India's contribution to the world, that the spiritual reality is always one, even if it comes in different guises and approaches. It is always Sat, Chit, Ananda, Vigraha. That is the understanding of what truth is. Always existing, all knowledgeable, Anand, blissful. See, it's very important when we talk about spiritual values to be happy. What's the point of talking of all this when we cannot smile? So happiness is such an essential contribution of Vedic India to this world because it is coming from the absolute truth. 4 blind men were walking down the road and they bumped into this large object. One blind man felt the object and said, "My dear brothers, there is a snake and it has wound itself around my neck." Second blind man said, "You're wrong, brother. I'm actually touching a sword and the sword is so sharp, it's piercing my cheek." The third blind man said, "No, I have felt the stump of a tree and I can barely put my hands around it." The fourth blind man said, "You're all wrong, my brothers, because I'm feeling this wide canvas and it is a very big carpet-like canvas in front of me." All 4 blind men bumped into one object. It was an elephant. But the first blind man felt the trunk of the elephant and thought it was a snake. One blind man may have felt the tusk of the elephant and thought it was a sword. The third blind man felt the leg of the elephant and thought it was a tree. And another blind man may have felt the tail of the elephant and thought it was a mouse. The important thing Vedic knowledge tells us is none of these blind men were wrong. In their own experience, each was right. But to say my experience is the only experience which is right is not very right. You see the point? And this is the glory of Vedic India, This is the magnanimity of Vedic India. And that is how Vedic India has always been open and always embraced universal values, something which is very unique in this world. And the greatest value we have embraced is the value of dharma. This is the key word in the Vedas and the Gita. And it has a variety of meanings to it. Duty. You're all esteemed professionals in your material areas of field. Yet you all are esteemed seekers of truth in your spiritual areas of field. But you do not see a contradiction. You do not see a dichotomy. This is dharma. There is a deeper meaning to dharma. If you talk about water, you always talk about water flowing, liquidity. If you talk about fire, there must be heat. So what is dharma? Dharma means the nature that each one of us has. Just like nature of fire is to burn, just like the nature of water is to flow. Therefore, we all have a higher nature. We have a lower nature, which is needed in this material world, but we have a higher nature. And everyone has a very specific nature that defines us, right? Today, Dr. Mahavir will have his nature. Dr. Belu Gupta ji will have her nature. So all of us have our nature. And because I do family law, sometimes, husband and wife come to me and they want to get divorced. And I tell them, why you want to get divorced? And the first thing they tell me is, his nature is so difficult. I thought I'll change it, but I can't. But I tell them Vedic India tells us that there is a vast difference between expectation and acceptance. In expectation, you will always be disappointed. But in acceptance, you will always become peaceful. We must never stop and fail to understand that when we understand each of us have a different nature and we accept each other's nature, then all the difficulties go away. This is not just a spiritual concept. It works in your law faculties. It works when we work in teams. We recognize each other's strengths and we try to fan the strength and we try to minimize the weaknesses. Where is this concept coming from? It is coming from dharma. It is coming from Vedic India. And what is our foundational nature? This is given to us. We all have different dharmas. You all are wives, husbands, brothers, sisters. They're all dharmas. We are professors, we are lawyers. It's all different dharmas. But Bhagavata Purana tells us that we all have one paro dharma. Savai pumsam paro dharma, yathor bhakti radok saje, ahaituki apratihata, yayatma suprasivati. We all have a supreme occupation. And that occupation is to find that connection in loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord. And how do we become satisfied in that service? When we have no motive except to serve others and God. And in that way, it will never be interrupted. This is the glory of Vedic India. Now I want to end my time with you by looking at two very glorious personalities from Vedic India who actually embrace both Paravidya and Aparavidya, who were expert in their fields, but who also were embracing the spiritual values of life. One is the great King Parikshit Maharaj, and the other is the great sage Dadichi, who has been recognized as a great spiritual personality in India. Now, Parikshit Maharaj was a great emperor, and he was the grandson of the Pandavas. At that time, India was known as Bharatvarsh, and he inherited Bharatvarsh after the great Mahabharat war. He was very, very greatly opulent, very prosperous. His values of devotion and renunciation was never affected by his material prosperity. This is very important. When you read about the records of all the ancient kings of Vedic India, they were all Raja Rishis. Raja Rishis means they were Raja. They were great in their field. That was the essence of Aparavidya, but they were Rishis. They never forgot that the values of devotion and renunciation was the way to become peaceful. One day, Parikshit Maharaj was cursed by a young boy known as Shringi Brahmana. He had accidentally put a garland of dead snake on his father Shamika Rishi when he was very tired and very hungry. But that boy, cursed Parikshit Maharaj to die within 7 days. Now, if I was cursed to die within 7 days, I will get so angry. I will find that person. If I was a lawyer, I may try to sue him, or I may try to counteract what he has done. Parikshit Maharaj did not do anything like that. He thought, by the time I try to counteract this, 7 days would pass and I would die. I would not understand the purpose of life. So instead of lamenting, cursing, and counter-cursing or counteracting, Parikshit Maharaj accepted the news in a very sagacious manner. And he immediately thought succession planning should be there. And he gave his kingdom to his able son. He retired to the banks of the river Yamuna, and he heard Srimad Bhagavatam from the great sage Shukadev Goswami. He only asked 2 questions, and these questions form the basis of our spiritual knowledge today. He was staring at death that was coming in 7 days, and he said, please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship, and also what he should not do. Please explain all of this to me. This is the purpose of life that Vedic India has never forgotten, even while pursuing all the great pursuits of mankind. And this is how the Bhagavatam was actually born. Parikshit Maharaj's mood is so important. Whenever we are faced with challenges, we have 2 ways to look at them. Either we see them as sources of distress, or we see them as sources of opportunities. That is the difference between a successful person in this world and a failure in this world. But this concept was given to us by Parikshit Maharaj in Bhagavatam, because this is how Parikshit Maharaj's attitude was to the calamity of the curse. I like this shloka. Tasyeva meghasya paravaresho vyasakta chittasya graheshu abhikshnam nirveda mulo dvijasaparupo yatra prasakto bhayamashudatte. It tells us the psychology of Parikshit Maharaj. This is what Parikshit Maharaj felt. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is the controller of everything. He has graciously overtaken me in the form of a Brahmana's curse. Due to my being very attached to my family, my wealth, the Lord has appeared in such a way that he knew that I was very attached to this material world, and that by giving me 7 days notice that I'm going to die, he's giving me ample time to prepare myself. This is a mark of a successful person. Today, when you read self-improvement books, you'll find all the great personalities tell you, make a liability into an asset. And that's what Bhagavatam gives us. That's what Vedic India gives us. The resilience of a devotee of Parikshit Maharaj. And Parikshit Maharaj heard Srimad Bhagavatam. He heard the pastimes of the Lord for 7 days. And at the end of 7 days, he had no fear. He was fearless. And that is the great quality that the glory of Vedic India gives us, that we are fearless in the face of any challenges, because we see the hand of a higher being. Very important. One last personality before we close. The great sage Dadichi. Now, Dadichi's story comes in Bhagavatam also. There was a very powerful demon, known as Vritasura. Can you see him in the picture? He looks really fearful, isn't it? He was so powerful, and he was created just to destroy the Devatas. The Devatas tried using their strength and their weapons to defeat him, but they could not. They all went to Lord Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu advised them that you approach this great personality known as Dadichi. He is the paragon of purity, and ask him for his bones. The Devatas thought, ask him for his bones. Who is going to give bones? Who is going to give the bones? Because if you give the bones, you have to give up your body. And Krishna, Lord Vishnu said, Dadichi is such a great personality that he will not hesitate to give his body for a higher cause. Because if you do not destroy Vritasur, he will destroy this entire world. When Dadyacha, that's another name for Dadichi, when he gives you his body, go to Vishwakarma, prepare a thunderbolt from his bones, and that thunderbolt weapon will slay this great demon Vritasur. So Dadichi was very important. So the Devatas, they all approached the hermitage of Dadichi. And they said, this is the situation. Will you please give up your body so that we can take your bones? And they were surprised. Dadiji said, I'm more than willing to submit my body for a higher cause. Why? Because I have faith that I'm not this body. This is the glory of Vedic India. That while we have pursued archaeology, advances in astronomy, mathematics, science, we have never forgotten that we are not this body. We have never forgotten that at the end of the day, when you reach that fine funeral pyre at the time of your death, you cannot even take your sharir with you. Even sharir remains in this world. Nothing comes with us. And this is what Dadichi said. And this is the translation exactly as he said. One who has no compassion for humanity in its suffering and does not sacrifice his impermanent body for a higher cause, he is pitied even by immovable beings. If one is unhappy to see the distress of others and happy to see their happiness, then his religious principles are appreciated by everyone. This body, O Devatas, will be eaten by jackals and dogs after death. It will not be of any use for me. It is usable only for a short time, and it may die at any moment. The body and the possessions, the riches and relatives, we should engage it for the benefit of others, or else they will be sources of tribulations and miseries. How can we conclude today? Vedic culture and Vedic India, they represent the epitome of advancement of civilization, both in the field of spirit and the field of matter. By nature, no matter how powerful matter is, we all know one thing: matter by nature is transient. Everything will deteriorate. If we accept its transient, it doesn't mean we cannot excel in our work. The Gita tells us to become the best lawyer you can be, to become the best doctor you can be, to become the best professor you can be. But we always are aware that this is done for a higher cause and not for selfish interest. All the great mathematicians, scientists, doctors, architects, astronomers, astrologers of Vedic India, they attained excellent heights of glory, but they were always grounded in the wisdom of Vedic values. At the end of the day, a man is remembered not so much for his material achievements, but for the way he lived his life and served humanity, and for how much faith he had in a higher being. What is a culture without glorious values that hark at this higher and deeper spiritual experience? And that is why we end today by taking the final contribution of Vedic India from the pages of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita has given us wonderful values, which till today are universal. If you look at these values, even a foreigner looking at these values will say, I can identify that they are great values. And he would be surprised that they came from the Bhagavad Gita. Because the Bhagavad Gita is not just for Vedic India. Vedic India is for all. And therefore the Bhagavad Gita is for all. Samadarshanaha, equal vision. This is a great value of Vedic India, that we do not discriminate between caste and creed, but we see the oneness of God in everyone. Ichcha, everyone has a choice based on their desire. Today, you all had a choice to attend it or not to attend. We all have an exercise of choice. No one is constrained and no one has the inability to decide something. Everyone is meant to be independent. And that's the beauty of glory of Vedic India, that it glorifies individualism. Ahimsa. Ahimsa is not just about stop eating meat and stop killing animals. Many of us have stopped eating meat and we have stopped killing animals. But when we speak to someone, our tongues are so sharp, they are like swords. They cut people with sarcasm and pain, criticism. The higher truth of ahimsa is not only physical violence, but stopping mental, emotional violence, of being gentle and loving. That is the higher principle. Acharya, all of you are acharyas because you lead by example. You know that as teachers, what you say and do will be mimicked by others. And therefore, teaching by example is the hallmark of Vedic India. And yet, despite all our achievements, we must always remember the great quality of amanitva, that we are always humbler than a blade of grass, and more tolerant than a tree. That is the greatness of being humble. And last but not least, the great value that binds all of us together, Preeti. What is the point of coming together with great contributions if we cannot learn to love and serve each other? If I gave this class without even smiling, I think after 15 minutes, you'll just close off and go. Because I'm able to at least smile because I enjoy my Sangha with all of you. That nice Sangam of Preeti is what is keeping us together. And this is the great contribution of Vedic India. I want to end by stating a prayer, which I think quintessentially describes the spirit of India, the Vedic India. Swastiastu Vishwasya Kalaha Prasidatam Dhyayantu Bhutani Shivam Mitodiya Manascha Badram Bhajata Dadoksaje Aveshyatam no Matirapi Ahaituki. May there be good fortune throughout the universe. May all envious persons be pacified. May all living entities become calm by practicing bhakti. For by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. Let us all engage in the service of the Supreme Transcendence, Lord Sri Krishna, and always remain absorbed in thought of him. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your association.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Your lecture actually gave me goosebumps, and I'm not able to come out of it. The way you have put forward things, Prabhuji, it is an eye opener for all of us. We have learned so many things. There are so many takeaway homes. The best thing I really liked in a lecture is the phrase that simple doesn't mean simplistic, and there is a lot of difference between expectation and acceptance. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for enlightening our minds here, for letting us know which is already existing and we should be knowing, but that was not apparent to us. So thank you so much for making those things apparent to us, because we should be feeling proud of the fact of the illustrious Vedic culture, which is very our own culture. And with this, I open the floor for questions. But today, I think the question rights are given only to the faculty members, and rest of the participants can put their questions in the feedback form. So if there are any faculties who want to ask the question, the organizers will unmute them and will allow them to ask the question.
Silence is good also.
But with your benign presence, Prabhuji, we should be making more and more benefit with your lecture and your teachings and teachings.
All these lectures are for my own mind and my own heart. I'm thousands of miles away from India, but I want to share with you, that we should never take for granted the great heritage we have. We are so blessed.
Very true.
And it becomes our responsibility to pass this to the next generation. The next generation. When somebody goes to a temple and breaks a coconut in front of Lord Ganesh, and if they turn to you and ask you why you have asked me to break a coconut, we should tell them that the coconut in Sanatan Dharma's allegory represents the false ego of the living entity. And by smashing it to the ground, we are telling in front of the great Supreme Absolute that humility is more important and that false pride must be smashed. These are little things, but they make a difference to a generation which has grown up not understanding these things. We must show them that we are not involved in ritual, but we are interested in spiritual. That is important. I see some hands going up, so that's good.
So I request Shiva Priyamvada to please put a question to Prabhuji.
Good evening, sir.
Shiva,
good
evening.
evening.
Can you switch on your video? Can you switch on your video, Shiva?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Am I visible and audible, ma'am?
Yes, both. Kindly go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, all my colleagues and sir. I really wanted to speak to somebody who can guide us on these things. And I just wanted to say that I teach gender justice at Law Center 2. And there is one point where it just caught me, because I've had similar discussions with many of my teachers and my students as well, that the Sanatan Dharma part that you said, that it was never Hinduism, rather than that, it is Sanatan Dharma. So since I teach gender, my question also comes from there itself, that a lot of things that we see around, the religious things, or the, like, for example, a simple example of breaking the coconut that you just said. So when I visit a temple, the deities, I can quote some temples, but I'll not do that here. But the day I want to break the coconut before the deity, and the pujari tells me that you cannot, because you're a woman and a woman is not supposed to do that. Or things like the recent debates on Kanyadan and how it is good, how is it bad. So these things are manifestation of our culture. While I believe, and I really strongly believe, that the Vedas do not make a distinction. So how do we actually understand that this is man-made and this should not be followed? How do we do that? I mean, I'm really confused, conflicted when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, you've asked a very important question. The problem with a lot of practices today is that when you actually go back to finding out where their sources are, you'll find a lot of their sources have actually developed through social norms rather than actual Vedic propositions. So what happens then is the social identity of women and men over time becomes mixed up with the absolute nature of spirit. And so what happens is it appears as if a scripture is discriminating between man and woman, but actually it is the social norms that have taken that and made it into what appears to be, oh, the Vedas are discriminating men and women. But actually it's very clear in all of the Gita and all of the Vedas that we are spirit soul. Ultimately, we are not man or woman. We have equal rights to the kingdom of God. That is the highest principle. But because of social norms, because of our own hidden agendas through the course of history, we have found it fit, as and when it suits us, to put something in and then call it part of our Vedic heritage. Give you a simple example. A boy was sitting down for his sister's wedding, and he saw wedding paraphernalia everywhere in front of him. Now, suddenly there was a cat that came, and it just walked into that area where the priest had so nicely and elaborately arranged everything. Now, when the priest saw that, he panicked because the cat would have destroyed everything that was there. So the priest quickly got a basket and put it over the cat and kept it to one side. And the wedding finished. Years later, when the boy was about to get married, he sits down and he looks at all the paraphernalia in front of him and he sees the priest. And then he tells the priest, "You've missed one very important item." The priest says, "What?" And he says, "Where's the cat under the basket? That's not part of it. It should be there." And this is how, through time, things become introduced and introduced. You're all lawyers, by training, and you're teachers. You know that we will never speak something in front of a judge, nor will we speak something in front of our students without it being properly substantiated. So until I see a primary document or a shloka or from Shastras telling me that this is it, then I stand corrected. And I think that's a very safe way to move. Of course, that doesn't mean we fight with everyone who says an opposite point. We have to balance. Some people will understand this, but if we cannot convince others, at least let us be internally convinced of the greatness of what we have. That is why the value of tolerance is also very important. It's a very big topic, but I hope I've covered some part of it.
Prabhuji, it's true. It's true in Vedas, there is no difference between male and female. It is by the social norms that we have introduced it. In the post-Vedic period, the difference between male and female have been introduced. And one thing more I would like to point out, you talk about sage Dadiji, who has given his body, his bones, for the service of the mankind. And I think from this started the practice of donating your organs.
Wonderful.
Thank you
for that. Yes, I'm very sure. And the rationale for that is that it benefits society. Because as Sage Dadichi said, what is the value of this body anyway? When I'm gone, will I hold to my bones? Better it is used for a higher cause. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Prabhuji,
No,
for
thank
your
you.
such an insightful discourse.
No. Thank you. We have
Another, yes.
Apur. Yeah.
Yeah. Apurva, will you switch on your video to ask the question?
Sorry, ma'am, I'm not able to as of now.
Okay, fine. Please go ahead with your question.
A very warm good evening, sir. It is a great privilege and an enlightenment to be part of your insightful lecture, sir. Sir, my question pertains to dharma, the concept of dharma. As far as I am able to perceive, sir, dharma is a conduct which ought to be done. And even Lord Krishna says that your karma should replicate your dharma. Sir, my question is whether dharma is subjective or it is an absolution. Thank you so much, sir.
Very nice point. I touched on it earlier in one of the slides. To keep it very short and to the point, dharma is both subjective and objective. Because the Vedas and the Gita recognize that we all have different dharmas. And each person's dharma is very, very specialized in most cases. For example, if I'm a husband to a particular wife, yes, I am a husband and that's my dharma. But how I perform that dharma is related very much to the activity and the relationship of who I am to my wife. And so each husband has a different dharma. And yet, objectively, there are some basic dharmas that must qualify you as a husband. So you see, the beauty of dharma is it has a very nice interflow of objectivity and subjectivity. Then again, there's the other point that's stated. There is the concept of paro dharma, which I spoke to you just now. Flowing from the Gita, right, you find the Bhagavata Purana. And that verse of Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo, Yator Bhakti Radok Saje is there. So the Gita actually says that while we have different dharmas and that we have to do them, there is also a Paro Dharma that defines all of us as human beings. And that is the quest to know who we are in relation to our Creator. That is the best way and the most succinct way I can answer Apurva. I hope it's useful at least.
So next two questions are by faculty members of Law Center 2. So we'll take first question of Dr. Ashish Kumar. Ashish, over to you.
Dr. Ashish.
Well, I am also having one query in my mind. I would like.
Please.
No. First, it's Dr. Ashish must.
Yes,
Good evening. Good evening, sir. I mean, it was a wonderful, enlightening session with you. Even though the time was very less, but you summarized very succinctly the most popular aspects of the Vedic religion. My question is related to a little bit of the knowledge part of this. What do you think whether the knowledge which we have gathered under this Vedic culture is a priori, or does it also include some elements of a posteriori? That is to say, do we need to reconfirm it by applying it in our practical life, or we have to take it as it has been handed down for generations to by the sages and by various philosophers?
Very nice point.
Could you shed some light on the claim that all such knowledge is a priori in nature?
There is one shloka in Bhagavata Purana that in the last line, it gives you this nice answer. Perhaps I can share it with you. Tad Shranavan Supatan Vicharana Paro. That is the way we have to approach this wonderful knowledge that we speak about. The first part of it that the Sastras tell us is that Tat Shranavan, we hear it first. In modern times, we may not hear it, we could read it, but the idea is to receive it first. So reception of the knowledge is very important. But after receiving it, how we receive it, as you said, becomes very important. After receiving it, there is a second stage known as Supatan. Supatan means what we have heard, we try to assimilate. Now, assimilation means there is an element of practicality always involved, because assimilation has to be according to time, place, and circumstances. So the knowledge comes as it is, it's stock and barrel, it's there. But Vedic scriptures always state that after acceptance of such knowledge, there must be the ability to assimilate it. And then the third quality is vicharana paro. Vicharana paro means to analyze it and then to practically apply it. So for us, every one of us will taste the mango. We'll all say it tastes good, but we'll all know that each of us is tasting it according to different degrees. But it's the same mango. It's the same mango. That's why this idea of transcendental knowledge is very powerful. It is never meant to be static. It is accepted for what it is first, but it must be tested and it must be practiced. If you test something and it works, please practice it. If you test it and it doesn't work, don't practice it. The Vedas are very clear about it. I hope that helps.
So that mandate comes from the Veda itself? Like
yes,
you can test it and you can accept it?
Yes, because all of us are at different stages of our realizations. If I have tested something, it may be working for me now because I'm at that stage of my own evolution. My experience cannot dictate your experience. The blind man may say that I am feeling the trunk and it's actually that is the elephant. But the other blind man will say, no, the tusk is the elephant. But actually they're both right, but they are at different levels of experience. And that is why it's very important for us when we present this knowledge. When I present this, for example, to students, I tell them, take this knowledge back and test it. Just like anything is to be tested, test it, but test it properly. If the Bhagavatam and Sastras tell us, you please chant a particular mantra, chant it in a certain way, take it back, chant it that way, try it for 7 days. If it works, come back, we'll talk about it. If it doesn't work, it's all right. It's not time. But it doesn't mean it wasn't a mango. And it doesn't mean everyone will love a mango. Is that helpful?
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, sir, would you like to ask a question, Mavi sir?
Yes. First of all, I think, Dr. Santosh was raising the hand.
Yeah, actually, he's been there for a while.
Yes, lead resource. First, because we are talking about the equality in the light of Sanatana Dharma or Vedic call, then we must observe that kind of norms.
Yes, sir. Thank
It's
you.
not the question of position.
Thank you, sir, for being so kind. So, Santosh sir, the question, the ground is all yours.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I would like to express my thanks to Prabhuji Sri Sivakumar Rajgopalji for such a erudite lecture. I just want to ask a question and a simple comment. Question goes like this: and it is on particular Bhagavad Gita. What particularly troubles me sometimes to do work without having any wish or ichha or even any dream about success or any kind of thing. I just want your view on that point. Like, can it be possible? And one more thing, like how one should practice just to do work without any ichha. And one thing, while studying some years back, not now, like 4 or 5 years back, I was reading a book on philosophy of religion. And I've encountered a very basic question. And sometimes our understanding is that when like Satogun, Tamoguna, Rajogun, and if you are at balance, we are at peace, and we have wishes or we have some sort of cravings when this balance disturbs. So what would the primary reason for which this world has been created? And if the world has been created, whether the superhuman being or the Lord, whether he is also in some sort of disbalance in this triguna, like Satogun, Tamagun, Rajogun, what is the basic purpose? And why this world has been created? Or it has been created without any purpose? Because Gita one side said that you do the work without anything, but is there any purpose for the creation of this world if this world has been created as per the Bhagavad Gita or as per the Bhagavad, what has been said in this respect? And one more thing that I would like to invite your comments or invite your statements on those. Like when we talk about Vedic India, there are so many things good and everything. And at the last slide, you have mentioned 6 or 7 points, basic points of the Vedic India. And I find these points have been very much reflected, very much inculcated in the personalities of two Indians. One is Gautam Buddha, and second is Mahatma Gandhi. And both have a historical records. Like Mahatma Gandhi, if you go and see the life of Mahatma Gandhi, all those 7 values are very much there. If we see the life of Gautam Buddha, what we know, because definitely I don't know the history. But as we understood from the history, life of Gautam Buddha also inculcate all these things, and very pacifically, very beautiful. And all it's like living experience. So we do not need to go to the like Vedic Veda and look, Parikshit is Lord Parikshit is also good, says that we have heard the stories from our childhood. So these two, like one question are coming. What is the primary purpose? What is the primary cause for which the world has been created? And if anything has has imprints on the mind of the Lord, it means there is some disbalance also at that point of time. And second, what do you think? How do you place these two personalities, Gautam Buddha and Mahatma Gandhi, that were in the line of the personalities and sages that has reflected or inculcated the values of Vedic India that you talked about, like ahimsa, acharya, love, affection, all these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Santoshji. That's a lot of questions. I'll try, because some of your questions require 1-2 hours to sit down and discuss, because you're talking about very fundamental things. Let me try what I can in the space of time that we have. First of all, I think the personalities that we speak about, that you have brought up, I would completely agree with you that they embody all the principles of the values that we shared. And I think the values that we shared are not just applicable to, say, personalities from that time, like Parikshit and Dadichi, but they're also applicable to the common man. You would have met many personalities in your life, hopefully, if we were fortunate. We would have met many persons who either embodied some of the values or lived like their lives according to the best of their abilities in all these values. So the glory of a culture is that a culture is not static. Eventually, the dynamism of a culture is that it has a way of permeating every man's life. And that is something that we should always keep in mind. When we speak about the values of the Gita, the Bible, or any other scripture, we are speaking about it not just from famous personalities, whom we sometimes highlight for purposes of a lecture, but we also see it around us. We see many nice people, and these persons have these great qualities. And frankly speaking, from a Vedic perspective, it is stated that everybody has these qualities, but it's only a question of whether we can manifest them. That is the other perception. As to the point about working and how we can work according to what the Gita says, that's a very interesting question that keeps coming up. And I think it's good that we are speaking about that, because you and I are all working. We're not sadhus sitting in a cave and we can say, well, this concept doesn't apply to me. But from my personal experience, I have never found a problem with this concept of work, because the Gita outlines to us that whenever we work, I know, for example, that my employer may be, in my case, I have my own practice, but if I have an employer, for example, my natural tendency is to try to either please the employer in such a way that I attain the goals that is set for me at the work. And that way I continue to secure my work and progress and improve. The only thing that's different from the Gita perspective is that if I have the duty of being a lawyer, then I should be the best lawyer I can be. And there is definitely part of being a good lawyer is to win cases. So my objective and goal must be clear that if a client comes to me, the goal is to win the case. But if I win or lose the case, the result of the winning gives me great satisfaction. That is there too. But the satisfaction that I get, I understand, is actually not only due to my work. A lot of it also has to do with the fact that I have been given this potency, this talent, and it's not just coming from me. The other thing that's important is this concept of working for a higher cause or renouncing the fruits of your work can only work when you feel that you have actually a connection with what we call the supreme employer. If you have a supreme employer, then you would want to dedicate whatever that you have to that person. And therefore, that relationship between what we call man and God becomes very essential as a component of the Gita. If that relationship is not developed, there is no incentive for us to understand how the dynamics will work. It becomes difficult. If I were to substitute God, for example, for my mother, and I say that I'm not interested in the results of my work, but I know when I do this work and I give it to you, mother, just you being happy that I've done my best is enough for me. Very often we feel that way when we love someone. So without that relationship, Santoshji, it becomes difficult to make that move towards that kind of satisfaction, you see. The last point I can think of, because you had a few questions, is of course the purpose of this creation. Now that is a question that's like an existential question that is spoken about in almost every scripture, not only in Vedic scripture. And every scripture generally puts forward one point. The point being that this material creation is also part of the overall creation. But the purpose of this creation is for us to have a journey where we are from where we are, to discover who we are and how we should actually be connected to the Supreme Creator. Now, I'm putting it to you in a very simple way, because this requires a lot of discussion to understand the dynamics and the nuances of that. But think of it this way, and I'm putting it again in a simple way that the Puranas have put. If supposing a child wants to perform an activity and he is insisting on going to the playground, it's dark and the father says, never mind, you shouldn't be going there, you should go tomorrow. The child is insisting. Now the father has to recognize that the child has ichcha, desire, and the child has a choice. So what the father does is he allows the child to go to the playground, but the playground is dark. And the father tells the child, well, if you're going to be here, there are certain things that may happen, may not happen. Now, if the child were to fall down in the playground, for example, and the child hurts himself, then what happens is the child has to understand that the child has come to the playground very much on his own volition. But the ability to go to the playground has been facilitated by the father. But sometimes the best way for us to learn something, according to Shastras, is to experience it. Sometimes the best way to understand a pain is to go through it. If I were to tell you not to go into that road because there's a hole in the ground, you have two options. You either hear me because you trust me, or you say, you know what, never mind. I have my own mind, my own faculties, let me go and experience it. So in a broad manner, this material world is an opportunity for us to experience certain things in life. And hopefully we'll be able to understand where we are coming from and try to start that journey back. That's all I could do now, Santoshji, in this short time. But thank you for your penetrating questions. It shows the degree of how much you have thought about life. Thank you, sir.
I should also thank Santosh sir for asking such futuristic questions, which require a lot of time. So Prabhuji, it is indicative of the fact that in future also we would like to associate with you and take more of the time.
I'm very happy to be of service.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Respected PIC sir, please over to your question.
Thank you, Veluji. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Prabhuji. Your session was very informative, especially in context of Vedic perspectives or values of Sanatana Dharma. I'm a little bit disturbed when I think about all these values which are related to the Vedas or Sanatana Dharma. Right now, you told us that Sanatana Dharma or Vedic values don't talk about any kind of discrimination or exploitation. Am I right, sir?
The values are universal, sir.
Yeah, okay, because you know that they don't teach and preach any kind of discrimination, even between man and women. But I have been seeing for the last so many centuries or immemorial that in case if these Vedic values or the Sanatana Dharma was teaching or preaching this kind of or inculcating this kind of values in our society, then where and how and when this Varna system or caste system or patriarchal system has taken its birth.
Very true. Very true.
Because only the Prabhuji, those who have been remained the prey of these kind of exploitation, discrimination, oppression, they could feel the pain.
Pain.
Because only the Vedas knows where the shoe pinches.
Yes. Very true.
So kindly guide us when, how, why, despite of the reason that we are claiming we have so Vedic values, good pious Sanatana Dharma, but why this kind of Dragon's teeth has taken birth in our society?
The why is very important, Mahavirji. The why is very important. The reason why the caste system has taken place in Sanatana Dharma, and if you think about it historically, there is a caste system in every society. Every society.
It means then there was no use of Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, or any Dharma, in case if in every society caste system is prevailed.
Look at it this way.
It is a social norm. It is not specified by Vedas.
मैडम बात सुनिए, बात चल रही है, मुझे उनसे बात करने दो. अब मैं सुन, पहले आपने कहा था तब भी उन्होंने social norm की बात की थी.
No, I wanted to explain that,
But in the pretense of social norm, we cannot close our eyes.
Correct. Absolutely. I agree. I am talking about it because, let me give you an example. I was teaching my French students, and some of them have traveled to India. And they said India is poisoned by the caste system.
It is not only the casteism, but racism also.
Yeah, it's all there.
I'm talking about the humanity only.
Yes, I'm also talking about that. I'm giving an example.
It's not question alone with the perspective.
I'm giving an example now. Now, these French students, some of them have been to India. And when they were speaking about Hindu culture, they told me, why are the Hindus full of discrimination? Why? And I just asked them one question. Why did the French Revolution come in the history of France? Why? And they told me it came because the labor class was so put down and they were so oppressed by the higher class of gentrification and royalty that they decided they had enough. And after they said that, they realized, oh, now I understand what you're saying. It is not only in India. Humanity, Mahavir Ji, as you correctly said, the biggest challenge for human beings is that we have three very powerful qualities that can overwhelm us. One is lust, which is karma. The other is greed, which is lobha.
Yeah.
Right? And the other one is krodha, which is anger. Lust, anger, and greed. And of these three, Shastras tell us, if you get angry, you can cool down. If you are lusty for something and you take it for a while, you can be cool. But there is no end to greed. No end to greed. Mahatma Gandhi said that there is no shortage of food in this world. The only problem is there's no shortage of greed in this world. That is the problem.
That's the problem that we know. That we are not suffering from the needs.
Yes,
we are suffering from more and more greeds.
Exactly. And if you look at the history,
white collar crime has taken its birth.
Yes. And if you look at the history,
because of the more and more needs.
Yes. If you look at the history of how this caste system has come, it has come because one particular society becomes greedy to maintain its status and it closes the door based on birth and not merit.
Not the door, but my mind also.
Yeah, mind door, everything.
Mind also, eyes also.
Yeah.
And close the all chapters of the
everything.
Vedas and your pious ideals, values of your Sanatana Dharma.
Yes.
They forget. Because in case if it was there, then we must have a little bit, very pious society.
Yes. So you are right. And I agree. And I think we all agree.
Nice.
But now,
it's not, it's not
no. The end to today is this. If others have done this, now it is incumbent upon us to make a difference. Someone may say, how can you make a difference? It doesn't matter. If you make a difference to one person, that makes a difference. You make a difference to another person, make a difference. Treat everyone, because they're all children of God. We don't have to wait for governments. We don't have to wait for society. We don't have to wait for our neighbor. It starts with us. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you. Thank you, sir.
For your question.
We hope
Any-
that in future also we'll invite you and you will bless us.
No, blessings are all from you, please. Thank
Right?
you. Thank you.
At least, sir, you are going to try. You are going to, try to preach the society by inculcating, by, giving injections,
Yes.
all these values
Yes.
to our society.
Yes.
And I do agree that the cancerous disease, like your caste, any kind of ism, either it is sexism or casteism or any kind of ism, could not be abolished overnight, because all those have been remained in the society, have been remaining in the society for the last so many centuries. So, and as Madam said, that it is a social norm. So it means it is social norm and it is a social evils which has been happening in the society.
Social
Evils,
Singh ji,
evils.
social evils
Then
created by the
that's why-
powerful people.
That's why
That
all
is
those
why-
could not be abolished overnight.
No, that
So
is
it
the
will take
reason.
time.
Today
It will take time.
we have so many gender just laws, but they have not been implemented.
Madam, it will take time
Justice has not been introduced.
because
We
all
have
of us
the
are
laws
not
of the book.
educated.
Yeah,
All of us
yeah,
are not educated. Although we claim to be educated, we are not educated.
yeah. Will of the society
We
is
could
not
we
there.
could not change our mindset. We could not change our attitude,
That is the problem.
our outlook.
That is the problem with us.
That is the problem.
Not,
And it will
not
change.
with dharma.
No, मैडम
Not
आज
with
स्टेट
dharma.
फॉर्म आप इतनी बात कर रहे हो, वैल्यू है और हमारे कितने टीचर हैं, इट्स ओनली बिकॉज ऑफ द स्टडी प्रोसेस, स्टडी रिफॉर्म्स, एंड इट विल टेक टाइम, बिकॉज जो हर वर्ष
It has
बीमारियां,
come.
सुनो
It will
मैडम,
come.
उसको आप 50 साल में, 70 साल में, 100 साल में नहीं कर सकते, कम से कम 1000 साल तो चाहिए उन बीमारियों को काटने के लिए.
Very true,
I
sir.
can see one thing. I can see one thing.
उससे जल्दी ही हो जाएंगी ठीक.
ना,
हजार
ना,
साल
ना,
नहीं
उससे जल्दी
चाहिए.
Please, Prabhuji.
हो जाएगी.
Prabhuji, please go ahead.
No, I can see one thing. The legal profession is very healthy.
लीगल
The legal profession is in a very healthy state because
Very
we're
healthy
having,
state.
we're having very good exchange of ideas and feelings. It shows that we all feel for this matter.
Yes, Prabhuji.
And
But
we all
otherwise,
want change.
otherwise, sir, there is no
Change
point
in
of
these
education.
social norms. Yeah.
In case if
And
you are
Prabhuji,
not
I think
having
it needs a
sentiments,
session.
All
no
of
point
us-
of education.
Mahavir Singh ji, all of us want change in these unjustified social norms.
Definitely.
Whether
Yeah,
it
but-
relates to female discrimination
But madam,
or
there
caste
is
system,
you
they
see,
should be
there is a
abolished.
But we are
difference
just
of the
waiting for that
degree.
spark.
There
We
is
are
a
just
difference
waiting
of
for
the
that spark to
degrees.
come from the society.
Yes,
And
Yeah.
sir, I would
Yeah.
like to make as mention here, Prabhuji, with the permission of His Grace
Thank you,
Prabhuji,
sir.
that it was Srila Prabhupada who could bring that
Gaji,
massive
it is
change in
unending
the
debate.
mindsets of hippies.
Yes.
It's an independent.
Absolutely.
सर ने मान ली, प्रभु जी ने मान ली.
हम भी मान रहे हैं, हम भी
No
मान रहे
answer
हैं.
of why.
सब मान रहे हैं सर. We
सब
all
मान
know
रहे हैं.
that fact.
It is a fact. सब
नहीं नहीं
मान
मानने
रहे
वाली
हैं.
बात है. देखिए, जब यहाँ पर हम बैठे हैं बातचीत करने के लिए, तो फिर अगर यहाँ पर भी हम बात नहीं कर सकते, तो कहाँ करेंगे जाके?
बिल्कुल सर.
But once we are discussing the ideals, values.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Prabhu ji.
सॉल्यूशन निकालें और ट्राई करें कि इन सब एविल्स को रिमूव वेलू.
Ma'am, can't
Velu,
hear you
let's-
properly. Ma'am, can't hear you.
बस
Let's
अगर
have
नहीं पे-
the vote
Yes,
of
ma'am.
thanks.
Yes, ma'am. So, Prabhuji, we have taken a lot of your time, so much of your precious time,
Thank
but
you.
it was very much needed. It was the need of the hour to have rekindled our brains and our hearts. Thank you so much.
And it
Now
will
I
remain need
request-
of the hour, sir.
Sure. I
Because,
enjoyed my session.
you
with
will
you.
have to inject these kind of injections time to time. जैसे
And we will trouble you, Prabhuji, in future
अभी
also.
3
Very
महीने में,
soon
2
we'll be
महीने में,
troubling.
महीने में.
I'm happy to be troubled. Don't worry. This is nice trouble.
You'll have to prescribe and inject these kind of good medicines.
Yes,
Yes,
yes, sir. So
Thank
now
you.
over to Dr. Nitesh Saraswat, who is one of the organizing team members of Seminar Committee of Law Center 2 to propose his vote of thanks. Over to you, Nitesh, sir. Uh,
He
Mr.
is not
Shubham, can you
visible.
please, Mr. Shubham, can you please unmute Dr. Nitesh?
Yeah, ma'am, I'm unmuted. Thank you, ma'am. First of all, I am also having greed of asking a question from Sivakumar Rajgopal sir. Uh, very short, I think you can answer these questions. First of all, the Vedas always talked about the nature. It never talked about the idol worship, as per best of my knowledge. So how do you define between these? These are also the misinterpretations from the Vedas. Just like the caste system is misinterpreted, like on the basis of work, the Varna system was formed in the Vedas. But now we are following the caste system. That is a misinterpretation. Just we as a lawyers, we always interpret the language in a very different kind of segment. The same is happening with us, and that is the problem Mahavir sir was talking about. So, sir,
Hey, sir, Nitesh, sir, don't you feel that Varna system was also the source of the highly discrimination or exploitation?
but sir,
In
it's a
case if we
part
are
of
talking
it
about
only.
the humanity,
Sir, it was
do
part
you,
of
do
it
you
only.
feel do you feel that was right?
No, sir,
Nitesh,
No.
sir,
definitely
you
not.
need to
अरे
kill
खून
the
तो
fire.
एक पॉजिटिव खून तो सभी में मिलेगा, सभी वर्णों में मिलेगा, सभी कास्टों में मिलेगा, बी पॉजिटिव भी सभी मिलेगा.
Right, sir, right. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right,
नेगेटिव
sir.
और पॉजिटिव,
And
नेगेटिव और
Nitesh,
पॉजिटिव
sir,
और
Nitesh,
फैक्टर
sir,
भी सभी में मिलेगा.
Nitesh,
कहाँ
sir, you
गया वर्ण,
mentioned that you have
वर्णा,
survey
कहाँ
of
गई कास्ट?
questions.
Actually, Dr. Nitesh, I
Nitesh,
have
sir,
about 5 minutes left.
yes.
That's the thing. I don't have so much time
Please,
because I have
Nitesh,
another
मैं sorry
please
sir,
engagement.
propose
sorry
a
sir.
vote of
But
thanks.
I'm
Okay, sir.
happy to
Propose a
Okay.
vote of
discuss this
thanks.
the next
चल
time. I'm
नितेश
always
आप
happy.
अपना
The greed was so you can say sorry, but many thanks to first of all Belu ma'am for organizing this international webinar, and she
Because of
called
PIC sir and Kiran
such a
ma'am.
first of all
such
thanks,
a
first thanks must be gone to our Prabhuji.
yes, of course,
है ना?
but the source
ये
is
भी
Belu ma'am.
ये
The
ये
source
ये
is Belu
सोशल
ma'am, sir.
नॉर्म नहीं है, ये लीगल नॉर्म है.
Right, sir.
हाँ.
The thanks to the webinar committee for extending this opportunity to
Yeah.
cast the vote of thanks to all the luminaries present in this webinar, especially the eminent and distinguished guest and speaker, Shri Sivakumar Rajgopalji. I extend my wholehearted thanks to Lord Krishna, first of all, who has given us this human life to use our wisdom for the development of human community on the whole. And in fact, we are opportune to receive the vibrations in the form of this knowledge from Bhagavad Gita and Veda to choose the spirituality as a living style while doing our professional work as well as other works and having all the family duties well and responsibilities. A wholehearted thanks to our PIC sir, Professor Mahavir Singh, who always endeavored to take our center to the great heights and
Thank you,
the
thank you.
great fame. And thanks to you, sir, for the great appreciation always to all of us for organizing such events and great motivation. And thanks to our respected Professor Kiran Gupta ma'am for always being so great guide
Nitesh,
to,
fight
Thank
also,
you.
to
fight
organize.
also for that kind of motivation.
Yes, sir, definitely,
Fight
definitely.
also.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I am thankful to the today's resource person, especially again, for enlightening us on the richest knowledge of the world, that is Vedic culture, what we should follow, what we should do, what the values we should adopt. And thanks to the Ethicraft Club for the collaboration with our law center too. And uh, should I also bring to some conclusion what we have got through this complete or
I
we are
think
Family.
running out of
that
time?
conclusion is reflected well in the questions
Yeah.
of the
Yes. So with this Vedic India perception and looking through the Vedic scriptures, Vedas, Upanishads, Purans, and knowledge we get from the Bhagavad Gita, we are immensely feeling and enlightening by this painkiller. I am taking it as a painkiller since I was paining in my always paining while facing some kind of anxieties but now the questions are being answered by sir. Sir, we are humbly thankful to you. And last but not the least, our colleagues and the organizing committee, Shri Ashwini Siwal, Saurabh Rana sir, to Pramod Tiwari sir, Belu Gupta ma'am, Eklavya Anand sir, for doing great efforts for organizing this event. And thanks to the student organizers, and thanks to everyone who is present in this seminar, my colleagues. And
Thank you
once
so
again,
much.
I will end this vote of thanks by reciting Shanti Path. Om Dhyau Shanti Riksham Shanti Prithvi Shanti Rap Shanti Roshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishve Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarva Shanti Shanti Reva Shanti Sama Shanti Redi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Prabhuji, can I just request you to recite Maha Mantra in your melodious voice just once, Prabhuji? Can I request you to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, please, Prabhuji. I know paucity of time is there, but just recitation once.
Yeah, sure.
Please, Prabhuji. Can we repeat after you, Prabhuji?
Yeah,
Anyone who's so
definitely,
willing can repeat after Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Rama, Hare Rama.
Rama Rama,
Hare
Hare Hare.
Hari Bol. Thank you so much,
Hare
Prabhuji,
Bol.
for
No,
this
thank
splendid
you.
event. Thank you so much, Professor Incharge, sir.
Have
Thank
a
you,
good
ma'am.
evening. Thank you very much. We'll be in
Thank you
touch.
so much, sir.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna. Thank
राधे
you.
राधे
Thanks to all.
सीताराम
Radhe Radhe.
हाँ राधे राधे बोल लो जब कृष्णा का नाम अभी तो डिस्क्रिमिनेशन तो राधे राधे सीताराम
Radhe Radhe Sita Ram. Jai
Thank
Shri
you.
Ram.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, you can
Hare
please
Krishna.
kindly leave. I need
I
to
will.
make such an important
Sure.
announcement.
I'll carry
Thank
on.
you, thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Prabhuji.
And special thanks to my colleagues who joined today, who could not join yesterday.
Yes, thank you so much to all the colleagues of Law Center
Yes.
too, to the organizing team. And I'm so sorry, our very respected and lovable Professor Obilal sir is with us here. Sir, I acknowledge your kind presence with us. And so sorry for acknowledging it so late, sir, but better late than never.
Thank you, Lal sir.
Thank you so much, sir. So another important announcement, you all must have filled the feedback form because that is essential for fetching a certificate to the program. And we will meet again on 29th and 30th, same time with different speakers and all the more making the function enthusiastic and knowledgeable. Looking forward for the participation of all